Hey Addicts, welcome back to another comic-related video. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be talking about The Walking Dead issue 185, On Guard. And this was a solid issue. It took me a little bit by surprise. We got to see more of the Commonwealth than I thought we were going to, but it's not a bad thing because there's a lot of things that go off in this issue that I believe is going to lead to some explosive stuff either in the next issue or the issue after that. So, getting right into it, let's kind of dissect this a bit. So at the beginning of the issue, we get to see the continuation of Rick and Dwight's discussion, and it's turning out very similar to, I think I said maybe 2 issues ago, one of the things I said where, you know, we're going to have this conflict between Rick and Dwight on like what tactic to do about the Commonwealth, because we get to see in this conversation that both Rick and Dwight want to do something to help the people in the Commonwealth, but their approaches are vastly drastic from one another. Dwight wants to take it by force. He wants to rally the people behind them and use the people, or I guess like the common workers, to revolt against the guards and the leaders, and as long as bringing their own army to the Commonwealth. And Rick's just like shutting it down, like, no, that's not how we're going to do things. You know, I want to have a plan that doesn't involve, you know, killing people, which we get to see later on, like, you know, more of that. I was going to say it here, but I'll just save it for the end. So next thing we actually get to see is a cut to the hilltop, and we get to see Carl and what he's up to. And, you know, in the last one, it's like, oh, he's probably doing something. Well, he's doing something. Or I guess someone, I guess I should say. We don't get to see it, though. We just get to see that Carl is sitting in bed, and he's talking. He's more talking to himself than Lydia, because she's asleep. But he's saying how he's a bit worried for his dad, Rick. And even though from what they know so far, the place is relatively safe, especially with Michonne being there and staying there. And so after he makes that comment, he's leaving her room, and he actually runs into Sophia. And this is probably the weirdest conversation that Carl has ever been a part of in the comic. I can't think of one that's weirder than this, because he runs into Sophia in the hallway, and they start talking about sex and partners, and Sophia is like, there's nobody here to have sex with. And like Carl, like, he has a perfect reaction to this. He just kind of like stares at her, doesn't say anything. He's like, well, here's my room, I'm gonna go, bye. It's like one of those things, I don't know, I mean, I think the only reason why it's there is because I know some people ship Sophia and Carl, and, you know, with Lydia in the mix and everything, it's not gonna happen right now. And I think Kirkman's still putting it in there to just kind of leave it open for maybe eventually, but to be honest, like, it just comes across as more like fan servicey than anything, because it feels really awkward when you read it. And judging by how I described it, I mean, you can probably imagine how awkward that would be. Now, and we only get 2 pages of Carl, so again, like I was saying, you know, just because something's on the cover or they're depicting something doesn't exactly mean it's going to go down in the comic the way it is. So, next part we get to see is Magna and Yumiko, and they're at Alexandria, and they're on guard. And I love this little talk that they have, because it's like these 2 characters have figured out Kirkman's pattern of like storytelling, like, oh, here's a huge conflict, they're going to go to battle against these people, and then, you know, there's going to be peaceful times, and that's just the time in between the war, or like the horror, as she says. And I think Kirkman I think he puts this in here because he like acknowledges that he has a pattern in this series, and I think he puts it in here because he's got something in mind that's going to break the pattern. I mean, at least that's my hope. I think that's the reason why he has this conversation in there. If it doesn't, that might land flat on its face, but I'm really excited to see where it's going, because for him to have characters actively acknowledge this, I believe something's coming that's going to surprise us all. So I'm really looking forward to that. We don't get much other substance of their conversation beside that, except for the fact that Magna says that, I mean, they're in it for the long haul. Whatever goes down between these communities, they're going to be a part of, because she's like, screw being on the road. That was bad. So they're here to stay until the very end. Now, we get to go back to the Commonwealth, and I believe at this point, the rest of the issue is at the Commonwealth. Starting off with, we get to see Rick, Michonne, and Elodie having dinner, and you can tell that Michonne's getting maybe a little bit too comfortable in her position, because she's starting to let things slip, or she's starting to slide back into this kind of lifestyle. She makes a comment about, after being so long in the apocalypse, you can just go back to being a waitress, and the waitress is staying right there, and, it comes across kind of like douchey and privileged, and so she, quickly catches herself, and she's like, I don't know why I said that, and it's really subtle, but it's kind of one of those things where you can tell, if shit goes down, she might, reactively side with Pamela, but it's still kind of one of those things, she'll probably catch herself, but I'm really curious to see where that goes in the long run, especially when stuff's getting heated. And along with this conversation, we get to see that, Rick is moved to tears because he's remembering, how it was in the old world, and then seeing it here kind of brought back as reality. He just is really sad that Andrea wasn't able to live long enough to see how special this place was. And that's kind of a brief, surmise quote, if you will. So immediately after that, we get to pan out to the outskirts of the Commonwealth with Eugene, and he's finally tinkering. Took a freaking issue, but he's finally tinkering on the train. And we get to figure out the train's not that bad of shape, and he can actually get it to work relatively easily. And for the life of me, I can't remember the girl that he was in contact with the radio. I can't remember her name, but we can see them kind of getting more of a relationship. She kisses him, and then he's like, I'm all in for that, and he reciprocates. Just little things there. Then we get to go back to Pamela in her office speaking with Lance, and they're talking about what they're going to do to try to make sure the situation that happened, the riot, doesn't happen again. They're talking about beefing up security, having guards on every corner of every street so that people know that they can't just pull shit whenever they feel like it. And in this conversation, Rick shows up to meet Pamela. Pamela excuses Lance, and then Rick and Pamela are talking, and we get this interaction between them. She's trying to feel out why he was moved, because I guess gossip spreads fast in a place like this, and she's basically, Rick opens up to her, and she opens up to him. He's like, oh, my wife died just recently, and Pamela, we get to figure out, had a daughter that didn't quite make it, and I hope they don't end up drawing a line. Well, she's already visited the other community, so it's no chance that her daughter's there, thankfully, because that would have been that would have been even more of a stretch than Michonne's daughter. But just kind of getting to see that Rick's wanting to work with her, even though he doesn't fully agree in her ideals. Then the very next page is something that I really like, and you can go check some of my older videos, but I think I was maybe not exactly on how it was going to go down, but kind of similar, because we get to see Dwight. He's walking down the street. He sees, the extra patrol guards coming, and he gets the idea of starting a little something. So he calls out to the guards, and he's telling them, trying to get the crowd riled up, kind of get a feel for what would happen if he causes something, if the crowd would immediately side with him, and saying that the guards are being, I don't know what the word I want them to use, but how they're, I guess, overreacting to the situation, being overly aggressive. And so, Dwight's spouting off all this, don't you see what you people are living in? It's like a military state. They got it in lockdown. They're, being oppressed to you. And, the guards are trying to get him to calm down, and they, try to grab him, and he's like, oh, you're just going to attack me? I'm not sitting here doing anything. I'm just talking. And so, that little spout comes off. He gets to see that the crowd is actually like, hey, leave that guy alone. And that leaves Dwight to be like, okay, I surrender, you can take me. And then we get to see he has a little bit of a smirk because his plan worked. And this leads to it leads into the big bombshell at the end with Rick coming to their prison jail and seeing Mercer and be like, hey, is he in here? And Mercer's like, yeah, he's in the back. And we get to see Dwight locked up. and Rick is talking to Dwight, and this is when you get to see more of their their different viewpoints. You know, Dwight wants to come in and just take out the people in charge, the people that are being oppressive, and then, you know, have, you know, Rick or him, you know, be the leaders, and then, you know, create a better environment for the people. And Rick's like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. The people they're misguided, but they're not necessarily bad, you know. And so he's trying to find out a way that where they can all live. It's, I guess, very similar to his ideology in his like last episodes of the show. And to me, like in the comic, it makes more sense, you know, at this point. And in this scenario too, it actually makes sense because, you know, the people in the comic, yeah, they're dicks. And, like, their thinking's messed up, but they haven't been, you know, like, killing people. And so that's kind of where Rick's coming from. You know, he says some more things here about how he wants to, you know, redo their thinking, show them that everybody is equals in this world. You know, after the world fell, it's everybody, and nobody's special. And so he kind of is walking off because his, you know, at this point, his discussion with Dwight's kind of gotten heated. And as he's walking out, he notices that Mercer was actually kind of eavesdropping on him. He's like, oh, so I didn't notice you were there. And Mercer just straight up comes and is like, Rick, you're the leader the Commonwealth needs. And that's where the issue ends. And I think going forward, it's going to be, you know, if something's, I think they're going to do a lot of layers to where the story ends. Apparently, I saw somebody say that it's rumored, or I guess either Kirkman hinted it, or it's rumored that in the first 5 pages of 186, something like crazy happens. And so I'm really curious to see what that is. Going into, you know, what I think, and then maybe some predictions. I think this issue is really good. Like I said in the last issue, or was it last issue or a couple issues? Because I don't know, they blur together. But this is a great time to get back into the story and, you know, catch up, because maybe before like 183, 184, it was a little slow. But in these last couple issues, especially this one, it's really picked up, and to the point where, you know, stuff's about to get, you know, spilling over, spouting off again. So if you guys haven't been keeping up, I recommend going back, picking it up, reading them all so you're current, because the next issue sounds like it's going to be crazy, and it's looking like it's going to be crazy. You know, and if you're somebody that's been reading them issue by issue, I think this is not going to disappoint you. We're just adding fuel to the fire, and eventually, you know, the flames are going to burn somebody. So, good issue. I recommend going and pick it up. A little bit of predictions. You know, I'm sticking to my guns on what I said in one of the other videos, where I think, you know, Mercer is going, you know, like we see here, we already know that he's gaining support, he's gaining more connections, you know, being with the princess, you know, and just seeing Rick and their ideologies and where they especially lived. And I think Mercer is going to side with them. He's going to want to help them in any way, be like, hey, if you can, I don't know. I think Mercer is the kind of guy that he's more in tune with Dwight's idea than Rick's. Now, Rick might be able to convince him to go more his way, but I think as it stands, Rick is going to tell Mercer the same thing he did Dwight. Be like, yeah, I know things are tough here, but, you know, we want to come at this like a good way. We don't want anybody to die. And maybe Rick goes off and, you know, Mercer starts talking with Dwight, and he's like, I want to make Rick the leader, and I don't care what I have to do. I just want my people to be living better. So I think, if anything, you know, like just to reiterate what I said in the other ones, you know, Dwight's probably going to cause some scheming, trying to make these, you know, after, like, Mercer could let him out, and then Dwight goes back, grabs the army, and then tries to come and do stuff while Mercer is left with rallying up the people and maybe seeing which guards are loyal to him. Or it could just be like they're doing that here and having Dwight and go grab some other people that came in from the community. Maybe goes to Eugene and be like, hey, is the train operational? Let's take the train and then let's bring everybody here, or at least all of our army. Something to that nature, you know, something that's going to cause things to pop off. And then Rick is going to, you know, have to be coming out and then stopping his own people from causing an uproar. But at this time, it might be too late. getting into the cover for next week, or not next week, I wish it was next week, next month, we get to see, it is called The Powder Keg, and it has, Rick, I'm not going to try to show it up with my phone again, because it always ends up bad, so if you want to, you can just Google 186 cover, but it has Rick, and he's holding up his hands, and he's stopping somebody, from shooting Pamela, who's standing behind him cowering, which it makes sense because Pamela doesn't seem like she has a spine in these kind of situations. But the most interesting thing about this is that the person holding the gun looks a lot like Michonne. I mean, granted, it only has the hands, but, you know, they wearing the same type of gloves Michonne typically wears, but it just doesn't make sense for it to be Michonne. So if anything, I feel like, you know, maybe it's more of like a, you know, kind of like a throwing off / metaphor where it is somebody in his group that's a part of his group, but it's misleading because it's not Michonne, you know, obviously, because I wouldn't see there being any reason for Michonne doing that unless something happens and, you know, Pamela ends up being responsible for Elodie's death. Then I could see that setting Michonne over the edge, but at this time it just doesn't make sense because she has expressed over and over that the Commonwealth is something that she wants to be a part of and make sure it lives on. So it's possible we even get to see if, you know, what I say or what I predict is right, and we get to see more people come that are from the communities. Maybe we get to see part of the Saviors. Maybe we get to see, you know, some of the people from Alexandria. I don't know how this would really work, though. I'll be honest. The only thing that kind of is a hole in all of this is the timing, because, you know, keep in mind they're still pretty far away. Even by train, I would imagine it would take maybe a day or something like that, which isn't too long, I guess, if they want to say it's a day, but I still think it'd be, you know, a while. Especially, I don't even know how, like, they don't know if they got fuel or anything, so, and plus, you know, the train's loud, so I don't know how they wouldn't hear that coming. But, so there's a few things in there that I don't know if it necessarily lines up, but regardless, I think things are going to pop off, and I think it's going to be caused by Dwight, maybe Mercer, and then that'll leave Pamela, you know, ended up maybe retaliating in a way, and then Rick trying to be in the middle, stopping both sides from doing stuff that they are going to regret. Wow, I could have just summed it up like that. Sorry, I wasted like 4 minutes of going into detail. But anyway, guys, that will conclude this recap and review of 185. We will be back for 186. I'm doing pretty good, being only a day behind on this, so hopefully we can keep that up. All news for our channel viewers on comic fans as well. The way I say things sometimes. We are going to have all of those new comic reviews up by next week. Because we were going to do some this week, but scheduling and everything like that didn't work out. So next week, expect it. We're going to have Die, The Realm, and then a few other surprises. So this is kind of kicking off that. And, you know, we're going to have videos up every day of the week. So be sure to come back and check those out. But anyway, guys, that'll conclude this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Later, Addicts.